Maybelline has sparked a backlash and calls for a boycott after they had two bearded men advertise their products. I'm not sure if it was both of them. I know that I saw this guy on the left advertising the Maybelline products. I'm not so concerned. I don't care all that much about if a guy wants to put on makeup or whatever. But this did get me thinking about where we go as a society, what this will result in, and why it's happening. So first, here's the story. Maybe he's born with it. Fury at Maybelline for using bearded men to promote new makeup line. I don't know if I actually care that guys are putting on makeup. They're not the kind of people I would personally associate with, but live and let live, right? But women are upset because they feel like men are invading their space, a space that men aren't typically in. Well, I started thinking about this. First thing I want to say, there's a lot of prominent YouTubers who are guys who put on makeup. It has become popular to a certain degree for whatever reason. Social media promoting it, LGBTQ issues and all of that stuff, and it results in things like this. The question is, do men actually use makeup? Why is this happening? Well, I think it's funny that women are mad. I would just say if you're a woman who sees this, don't buy the product. It's that simple. And now's an opportunity for, I don't even want to say conservative makeup brands, but I guess to emerge and cater to women. But the reality is, if this company wants to advertise makeup to men, so be it. There's an obvious reason why they're doing it. In fact, there's two big reasons: an immediate short-term capitalist reason and a long-term evolutionary reason. The first is obvious. You're a makeup company. Your market share is half the country. That's it. Not even every woman wears makeup. How do you expand your market cap? You need men wearing makeup. I am sure what happened was you get some executive going into a boardroom and saying, why have our sales stagnated? And all the executives sitting around like, well, I don't know. Is it because we need more colors? And then a guy goes, no, it's because we have sold to every woman already. What if I told you there was a way to double our market cap in a span of only a few months, maybe in a few years? They say, well, that's absurd. How could you double it? And he says, men. That's right. Get men to wear makeup and bang. Now we're talking. Now you're selling your product to a whole new market that has not worn makeup before. That's obvious. I think the first problem is these guys, they're not the typical guy. In fact, they're a very, very, very small portion of men. You can see this guy's doing duck face. This guy he's got curls in his beard. Do you, man? I got no beef. But the average guy's not going to want to wear makeup. The average guy is not going to engage in this behavior. So they're not actually going to double their market. They're just going to get a slightly larger market than they previously had. But it makes sense. Market to a new market, right? But there is an evolutionary reason why this is happening. The one thing I noticed that with these two guys is that they behave in a very effeminate way. And again, I'll stress this. I got no beef. Live your lives, man. But see this guy doing the duck face thing as he applies his makeup? This guy looks like he's got some kind of Northern European ancestry. He's got the reddish beard. Maybe he's Scottish. Man, back in the day, these people were brutal warriors. And maybe he's Nordic. I don't know. They were kidnapping people and raping and pillaging and all that really crazy stuff. How did it come to be that now these men have decided to take on a effeminate role that we did not see in the past? When I look at this stuff, I think it's decently obvious, but it's just my hypothesis. Why is it that we did not tolerate, say, homosexuality for the most part in the past? I can already hear the left is saying, that's not true. There were many societies that did tolerate it, blah, blah, blah. To varying degrees, it was and was not tolerated. And religious European groups tolerated it much less for a period of time. But of course, it's true to say, like in the Roman Empire and in Greece, there's a lot of really crazy stuff going on. But it's fairly obvious. Gender roles emerged through evolutionary pressure. Now, I don't understand why that's a controversial statement. Perhaps it's because the left takes a religious approach to their worldviews, and thus you cannot make an evolutionary argument. I think it's insane. But if you make the argument that, I'll put it this way. If you have 100 men and 100 women in a tribe living in a little village and 99 men die, the village will struggle, but mostly be okay. Why? Because women can do most things men can do. Men may be stronger and faster when it comes to many activities, hunting, for instance. But women can still hunt. And so there's a great degree of success in that if the women had to take up that role. But with one guy, he can have 100 babies in 9 months if he really gets at it. Not literally, but you get my point. One man can have a ton of kids, but each woman can only make one child every 9 months. That's why women tend to be in the more protected or restricted, in some, depending on your argument, roles. This is why men tend to be gruffer and tougher, because they were, as many people described, expendable. Not intentionally, but that's just the way things were evolutionarily. Because if the guys went on the hunt, and so you got 10 guys, and 7 of them died because a grizzly bear mauled them to death, the strongest, the fastest survived. He comes back and says, I'm sorry, the men didn't make it. They were killed by a bear. That man, those 2 other guys, the survivors are the only ones who end up procreating for the most part. This creates an evolutionary pressure where the men who succeed in the roles they take on tend to be more gruff and masculine, as we traditionally know. That is to say, the guys who survived had kids. Those kids tended to be taught by the stronger and toughest of men. Those men also knew that if the women died, they would cease to exist. Therefore, they would greatly protect women, and thus came the emergence of gender roles. The women would gather. This is why women some women can see more colors than men, called tetrachromats. And they argue this is because women would forage for fruit, and the shade of a fruit or berry mattered. If I go out and I pick a berry that's slightly too unripe, well, then it's not as good for you. It's not right. There's an optimal color for these berries. Blackberries, for instance, start green, turn white, then red, then black. And knowing the color difference matters. So women developed slightly different gender roles. Thus, the effeminate, the caring, the nurturing emerges. All hypothesis, not original ideas to me, things you can read online and perhaps could be wrong. I am not an evolutionary biologist. My point is, why do we see men wearing makeup? Because there's no survivor bias anymore. There is no reason to be gruff. There is no looming bear threat for the most part. Why are women becoming more masculine? For the same reasons. There's no threat to the women. I'm sure in the past there'd be a woman who says, I want to go on the hunt. And they'd be like, no, because if you die, we cease to exist. The women must be protected at all costs. And minimizing risk to women is the most important thing imaginable. So they would say, absolutely not. Women don't do men's roles. But then what happens? Women want to work in an accounting firm. There's no danger there. There's no risk to the woman. Plus, we're massively, maybe you don't agree with the term overpopulated, but let me just say, we are at no risk of extinction. Well, I take that back. Maybe nuclear war or something. But in terms of reproduction and food consumption, humans probably going to be around. And even after nuclear war, I am not convinced humans would go extinct. Thus, there is no bias in favor of femininity or a female gender role. Women have no reason to be barred from anything. Men have no reason to fight grizzly bears or go to war. So there's no reason for men to be gruff masculine. You can have effeminate men and masculine women. Thus, we see the emergence of the non-binary ideas and things like this. Now, to be completely honest, I think the whole non-binary thing is, I think they lack understanding in gender roles, because there's no right or wrong way to be a boy or a girl. There's no right or wrong way to be a man or a woman. There are just certain social expectations and values that you may or may not adhere to. Some of these things border into the criminal, like don't attack people, and some of them are just they would result in the socially unacceptable. And then there's the socially acceptable behaviors. This, what we're seeing here, is socially controversial. Men deviating from the traditional gender roles, but there's no reason for them to uphold their traditional gender roles. Now, I'm not saying I agree with men putting on makeup or anything like that. I think there is a good reason for traditional gender roles. What I mean to say, when there is none, there is no mandated threat to life based on what these guys are doing. So there is no natural threat to them by doing this, other than some people just reject the concept. Personally, I think that the increasing risk, here's my view on this. There's a good reason for male and female gender roles. They don't need to be adhered to 100%. Men and women are free to choose to live how they want to live. In my views, fairly libertarian. But I'll tell you what the result will be. If we were to follow the same logic in thought, the end result is men like this will cease to exist. They're less likely to have kids, less likely to teach their kids, less likely to survive, more likely to abort their kids, more likely to sterilize their kids. And so what happens? Once again, we will see, while there may be an ebb and flow to this, a survivorship bias will return. With the emergence of limitless, restrictionless abortion, with the advocacy for child sterilization and medication. These pressures are emerging through natural social behaviors because people don't care about reproducing anymore. I'm not saying every person, I'm saying because we've gotten to this point. Now those who don't care survive, and their ideas flourish and result in kids who will not reproduce. What happens then? The ebb and flow. The end result will be, given enough time, give it 20 years, this group will be in the minority again because their ideas are not popular, and you will end up with, once again, a more traditional space because traditional values have a higher survivorship rate than non-traditional values. Not all of them, and it's not absolute. We have a bunch of really bad ideas we get rid of. Traditional medicine, we inject mercury for syphilis. No, bad idea. Progress can be a great thing. In fact, naturally it is. But when these people argue progress is something that makes no sense, you get the point. And when people say progressives are, they don't agree with it. Ultimately, what I end up seeing here is these behaviors can't persist. They can't. Because all that matters is these groups are more likely to sterilize their kids or abort their kids. End of story. We're done. That means less kids from these groups, more kids from conservative groups. And then people argue, yeah, but they're coming after your kids. Non-argument. That does not matter. Everyone's influencing everyone all the time. Conservatives have influence as well, and they're gaining more. The idea that children deviate from their parents to such a great degree, leftism will survive, is incorrect. Now, it is true that if you send your kids off to them, you may lose your kids ideologically. But as they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree. So I do not see this stuff persisting for a very, very long time. But who knows? Far be it from me to be a psychic or to know the future. Those are just my arguments as to why this stuff probably won't exist. I'm not a fan of it. I wouldn't want to associate with these guys. But you know what, man? I'm not going to, we call it tolerance. Tolerate. I don't even care about tolerating. I'm just saying, I won't interact with these dudes, so I don't care. They can do their thing and live how they want to live. I just think in the long run, cultural ideas like this can't survive. Evolution. And of course, these people say that the evolutionary arguments for these things are bigoted and racist or whatever. It's biological essentialism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fine, don't believe in evolution. Whatever, I don't care. Have a nice day. Next segment's coming up in a few minutes. Stick around and I'll see you all shortly.